Okay, so a review of the loanable funds market. First, we'll draw our graphs, which on the vertical axis, we're going to have the real interest rate, and on the horizontal axis, the quantity of loanable funds. Our supply of loanable funds, which we know are the lenders, meaning the banks, and also the savers, meaning those that are putting their money in the banks to be lent out. And then the demand curve, the demand of loanable funds, these are the borrowers. Okay, the people going for loans, for new cars and homes and all that. So in our loanable funds market, we've talked about the things that shift the supply curve, and now let's focus on things that shift the demand curve. One of the things that is going to shift the demand curve is when the government is deficit spending. When the government is deficit spending, meaning they're spending more than they make in tax revenue, so they're operating at a deficit, which our government is. That is going to cause, you have to just consider the government being another borrower. If the government's operating at a deficit, they're going to need to borrow funds in order to pay for their spending. So that is going to shift our demand for loanable funds to the right. So originally, our interest rate was here, R equilibrium, right? Q equilibrium. Then when the government came into the market and started borrowing funds, this is what happened to our interest rate. So our new interest rate is up here. So interest rates have risen because the government is now borrowing funds in the private market. This is an important economic phenomenon called crowding out, the crowding out theory. This is what happens. Probably the government came in a recessionary gap and tried to fix it using fiscal policy. The fiscal policy we spoke about was government spending. Okay, so if the government was trying to spend in order to stimulate the economy from a recessionary gap, what ultimately happens if they're deficit spending, they cause the interest rates in the economy to rise. And as the interest rates rise, it causes investment to drop. Businesses will not invest with these high interest rates, and ultimately that causes aggregate demand to drop, which is the opposite of what we want. And that's why it's called crowding out, because what the government has done, they stepped in and tried to help things through fiscal policy, but they wound up crowding out the private businesses that wanted to invest. They can't do it anymore because of these high interest rates, and it leads to further recession. The other shifter of the aggregate demand curve, let me just fix my markers. Of course, we know that's what happens if the demand curve shifts to the right, but the demand curve could also shift to the left. Okay, if the government has a budget surplus and they reduce the amount that they're borrowing, that's going to cause a left shift in the demand for loanable funds, which will decrease interest rates. Right, that's causing a decrease in interest rates, and when interest rates decrease, investment increases and aggregate demand increases. Okay, so this is something that would pull us out of a recession. Okay, that's just a review of the shifters of the demand for loanable funds. Make sure everything's properly labeled, including the arrows as to where the interest rate is increasing or decreasing. Hope that helps.